just over a decade ago now. The government of the day made a commitment to rebuild or renovate or repair 115 schools. So far, we have completed 81 schools in that program. We've got another 27 in the pipeline at the moment, so work is happening, and this is one of the ones where that work is happening. And today we're announcing the final instalment of funding, $301 million, to make sure that we can finish the overall Christchurch schools rebuild program. It's been a massive undertaking. Along the way, we've learned a lot. It's been probably the biggest school rebuild and renovation program we've ever undertaken in New Zealand's history. Some of the schools ended up needing more work than was initially estimated following the quakes to bring them up to standard and to give them the type of quality learning environment we want all of our kids and teachers to be able to have. And I think that what we've been able to achieve here with the Christchurch schools rebuild provides a useful template for where we have to do similar kind of projects in other parts of the country in the future. So, it's a big milestone being able to get to the last instalment of funding so that the last of that work can get underway. And I know that for the schools who are really enjoying their new spaces, that they're making the most of them. And with that, I'm happy to open up for questions.
Students are striking for climate change today. Have you seen their 5 key demands they want the government to act on?
Yes, I have, and the government's making a lot of progress on many of the issues that the students are striking about. Climate change has been at the forefront of the government's agenda over the last 5.5 years, and it will continue to be so.
What assurance can you give young people that your government will deliver the emissions reduction action that's required to give them a safe future?
Well, if you look at the emissions reduction plans that we've already set out, you can see that we're making significant progress. Of course, we've still got some heavy lifting to do, though. There's no question about that, and the government's absolutely committed to doing it.
You said this is the last top-up for the Christchurch schools rebuild. Is that your expectation, that this will be the last time you have to increase the money for this funding?
That's certainly my expectation. That's the advice that we've got at the moment. You never say absolutely never, but we have been quite conservative in the way we've funded the rebuild program to make sure that we're providing enough funding to get the work done that needs to be done.
And you say it might be a bit of a template for other areas. Is it the likes of some of the areas affected by flooding? You may look at sort of similar things, because a lot of schools up in those areas have been affected as well.
There's been some significant damage to some of the schools, and so we will be able to draw on the lessons from the Christchurch experience and making sure that we're getting those schools back up and running as quickly as possible, first and foremost, but then also rebuilding so that they're resilient and sustainable and providing the kind of learning environment that we want them to have in the future.
What would be some of the lessons that you would take then from what you've seen in Christchurch? I mean, after the announcements were made in Christchurch about the redistribution of some of the schools, it went down pretty badly. What sort of lessons would you take from what you've seen?
Well, I certainly think some of those very early lessons about the damage that can be done to community cohesion when you try and push through an amalgamation process right in the heart of sort of an emergency response. We certainly wouldn't be trying that in any other part of the country. But there are lessons just in terms of the way we manage the construction process that will have, I think, a bearing on other school rebuild projects around the country. So we've moved to more sort of standardised designs here because we know we can build them faster and cheaper if we stick to similar designs. And we can also iron out some of the difficulties that we've had in the past with things like leaky buildings by not having a whole lot of bespoke designs at different schools, because it's when you have those bespoke designs that you end up with problems emerging later on in the future.
And one of the last 2 schools to still hasn't started the rebuild process is Chisnellwood. There's obviously a bit of controversy about the advice that they should go down to 400, a roll of 400. What's your view on that? Is the government sticking to that point, or is it something that's open for discussion?
One of the real complexities around the Christchurch school rebuild program was that I think the decisions taken around year 7 and 8 schooling across the Canterbury Plains were somewhat inconsistent. And as a result, we're kind of dealing with the legacy of that at the moment. So we're working through that with the Chisnellwood community. There's certainly more demand for intermediate level education in that area than the zone would suggest. And so that's just something that we have to work through carefully, because we've also got to consider the other schools and the impact of any change to the plan for Chisnellwood might have on the other schools as well.
This is the second time that the budget has been increased. Why was 1.3 billion not enough, and why was that additional 300 million needed?
Well, a lot happens in a 10-year period, and during that time we've clearly seen quite a significant cost escalation in the building and construction sector. We didn't want to leave these schools shortchanged, so where we've needed to, we have increased the budget so that we can deliver what they were promised.
What would have happened had you not done this today?
Well, we would have had to scale back, the work that's being done, and some schools would have had to wait longer. Now, in a process like this, not every school gets absolutely everything that they want, but we are delivering, and I'm confident that the money that we've allocated now will deliver what we committed to, which was to make sure that they have up-to-date, fit-for-purpose learning environments.
Prime Minister, New Zealand TikTok data can be accessed by employees from 5 different countries around the world. Does this concern you given privacy and data concerns around TikTok?
My message to everyone when they're downloading any app on their phone or using any third-party provided platform is to know what's happening with your own data, know what you're signing up to. We don't have a regime in New Zealand where we ban particular apps. I know other countries have done a bit more of that in recent times. We don't tend to do that in New Zealand. We tend to work on the basis that people should make their own informed decisions. So my message to everyone is just know what's happening with your data. When you're providing your information and your photos, your videos, your images, your personal information to a platform, you should know what they're going to do with it.
Parliament is considering banning the app from parliamentary devices. Is this something you would support?
Look, that's ultimately a matter for the relevant agencies concerned.
When you were police minister, bear with me on this one,
Yeah.
you were advised that the new drug driving legislation would be tough to enact due to a lack of available technology, which has now been proven to be true just ahead of the rollout. Was the legislation a waste of time and resources?
No, the legislation is now there so that when there is a platform that allows for roadside testing on the spot, it can be rolled out and implemented quite quickly. When we implemented roadside on-the-spot testing for drink driving, for example, initially there was a two-stage process. So people would provide an on-the-spot test, but then they would have to provide an evidential test. And as the technology got better, that process was able to be streamlined. I imagine that a similar process will happen here. We haven't got to the point where the police are confident that they've got a reliable on-the-spot test that can be used on an evidential basis. And so, they'll explore how they continue to make sure that they're taking a zero-tolerance approach to drug driving in the meantime, and they'll continue to work to identify a technology solution that will allow them to do more of that on-the-spot testing.
Prime Minister, are you aware of Rob Campbell's comments about health restructuring and potentially thousands of jobs being lost? Can you comment on that?
Look, I don't want to get into all of that. He's entitled to express and say whatever he wants to say now as a private citizen. But what I would say is that his departure from the two roles that he has left in the last 48 hours was nothing to do with policy and everything to do with what's the appropriate level of conduct for someone who's holding a position in which they're expected to be politically impartial.
You're going to the Al-Noor Mosque after this. So will you have is there a particular message that you'll have for that community when you meet with them?
This is my first opportunity to meet with them since I've become Prime Minister. It's clearly a community that has a real interest in a particular program of work that the government's undertaking, which is the recommendations arising from the Royal Commission into March 15. And so I imagine that they want to share with me some views that they've got about how we're doing, and I want to hear from them how they think we're doing, and hear directly their feedback on that, and just provide them with some reassurance, really, that while there's been a change in Prime Minister, we're still absolutely committed to seeing that process through.
And there's been news today that the coroner hearing will be delayed further. That may be frustrating to some people. Will you have any particular comments on that? Do you reassure them about that process?
The independence of the coronial process, I think, is one that's really important. And so I will certainly reiterate that to them. It's not something that politicians should interfere with. But I can certainly understand why they will want to see some outcomes. But I know that they'll want to see the process done thoroughly as well.
Prime Minister, Michael Wood says voting age should be brought down to 16 in the next little while. What does he mean by that?
I think what he was saying is that you should expect to see some further clarity from the Cabinet on the government's intentions on that in the next little while. So people will be familiar, the court's made a ruling, Parliament now has to consider that. So that's been referred to a select committee for consideration. How the government ultimately responds to that process is something that we will turn our minds to in due course.
After what's been happening up north, is climate change even more of a top priority now?
There's no question we're seeing climate change, we're seeing the effects of climate change here and now. If you look at what's happened with our flooding, with the cyclone, we're going to see more of these sorts of events. And that just, I think, underscores for New Zealand how important it is that we do two things. One is that we do everything we can to reduce climate change, to reduce the human-induced effects on the climate. But the second is that we also look at how we can be more resilient and how we can make sure that we're adapting to accept that actually there are going to be more of these sorts of events in the future.
Marissa, this week is seeing tens of thousands of teachers meet as part of their collective agreement negotiations. There's a lot of anger and frustration around pay and working conditions. NZEI have not ruled out industrial action. What will you be doing to ensure that doesn't occur?
So the NZEI having stop work meetings to consider an offer. The offer that was made to them was received favourably at the time. It was made prior to Christmas. And so I think we just let that process run its course. I'm aware that the secondary teachers and the primary teachers aren't always completely of one mind on this, and so the secondary teachers are taking a different view on that. We'll continue to bargain with them in good faith, as you would expect in a process like this.
Are you doing enough to create change for future generations in terms of climate change?
There's always more to be done. As I said, there's still some heavy lifting ahead of us. But many of the things that are going to make the biggest difference to our emissions are going to take some time. So when we think about, transitioning to more renewable energy use, one of the biggest things that we can do, that doesn't happen overnight. It requires some hard work and some ongoing work to make that happen. And that's exactly what the government's focused on.
You were going to meet with the Canterbury Chamber of Commerce this morning, but have you had advice about how Canterbury and Christchurch is faring compared to other parts of the country, and are you happy with how the overall rebuild is going?
Look, I was looking forward to meeting with the Canterbury businesses represented through the Chamber of Commerce this morning. Unfortunately, my flight got cancelled, and so I had to take a bit of a wayward tour in order to get down to Christchurch today. And that was the thing that I wasn't able to complete of the program that I had. And so I'll certainly endeavour to come back here again so that I can meet with Christchurch business leaders. I had the opportunity to meet with some of them in the latter part of last year in my different roles, previous roles, as Minister of Education and Minister of Police. So I have had some feedback from them on what the issues are that they are concerned about. And I imagine that many of those will be similar now to what they were back then. So we had some good conversations about labour shortages and the fact that they're still looking for skilled labour. So they were looking to the education system to do better. We had conversations about immigration. Certainly issues around the crime and the law and order space were front of mind. I think there was a lot of attention at that point being paid to ram raids and so on. And so that was a topic of discussion. We've made a lot of progress in helping to bring the number of those sorts of events down since then. So the number of ram raids and the amount of youth offending we're seeing in that space, we have actually started to put some downward pressure on that. We're not there yet. One ram raid is a ram raid too many as far as I'm concerned. But we've made some progress on that, and things like the Fog Cannons initiative just to provide more safety and comfort to those retailers who are quite rightly concerned about that. And we've made some real progress there as well. So I imagine those were going to be topics that they wanted to talk to me about, along with just more broadly the general economic picture and I was looking forward to hearing what they think they're going to see in the next little while, recognising too that they'll have some reflections on how as businesses to best get through a challenging disaster response and what lessons that we can take from their experiences to help inform our response in other parts of the country.
Prime Minister, sorry, do you have a TikTok account, and will you be considering using it as Prime Minister and during the election?
No, this is going to age me a bit. No, I don't have a TikTok account, I'm afraid.
Will you be considering using it as Prime Minister and during the election?
No, it's not a platform that I have ever used before. All right, thanks everybody. Cheers.
No.